Welcome to my Node.js tutorial video, and today I'm going to show you how you can use MQTT under Node-RED. In this video we are going to talk about the following. So I will talk firstly about how you can connect to an MQTT broker in Node-RED in order to start the communication. We are going to see a couple of examples how you can send and receive messages. I'm also going to show you that outside Node-RED, what is the best tool in order to look at the MQTT messages. So if you need a second application just to make sure that everything is going right, I would recommend using MQTT Explorer. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit. And I'm also going to show you a couple of examples, like if you really have to think about how you would use MQTT in a home scenario, in a home automation scenario. I'm going to go through a couple of examples. I also want to talk about the importance of the various data type and what you need to look out for example, if you are dealing with numbers or JSON. And also there is some new functionality in the MQTT which has been introduced a couple of months ago. So you have more options how you can dynamically control the MQTT element. I personally don't use this, but I think there are some good scenarios where you might want to control your MQTT node. And then finally, I made a separate video on some really useful toolbox functions, especially if you are using MQTT for devices or sensors, and you might want to measure what was the last time you communicated with it. So for example, maybe the device has gone offline. So I have a set of functions that I talk in a separate video, but I'm going to quickly talk about this. So if you are interested, you can watch that video as well. And if you are only interested in certain part of this video, there are jump links in the video description, and you can see all the chapters in the YouTube timeline as well. I want to talk about how you use MQTT in Node-RED. So I'm going to skip on how you install MQTT, what MQTT is. I'm going to talk about some details, but if you don't know these basics or if you need some more knowledge, I would probably recommend just to search for these videos. I haven't made such videos, but I think there are plenty on YouTube already. And since we talk about MQTT and setup, I just want to make sure that your MQTT is up and running by the time you watch this video. And I also want to just convey some good practices, making sure that your MQTT is correctly configured, the anonymous access is not enabled, so you have a user ID and a password created. And if you are planning to use the MQTT over the open internet, then you should really set up some sort of security, because otherwise your data and your password are going to travel in plain text over the internet, which is definitely not good. So let's start with the basic things, and as you can see, I already prepared a couple of examples, but I want to go through the basics with you manually. If you filter on the MQTT itself, you see that it's actually fairly simple, because we only have two nodes, the mqtt-in, where you receive messages from the MQTT network, and the mqtt-out, where you send messages out. So what I'm going to do is I just drag the MQTT message onto into my flow, and I'm going to double click, and the first thing that you need to configure is your server or the MQTT broker. And as you can see, I already have a few configured. So I have one broker which is running on the same server where the Node-RED is running, and if you are using Node-RED, or if you are even using Home Assistant with Node-RED and MQTT, that's going to be the case for you as well, most probably. But I have other services as well. So for example, I'm subscribed or part of a TinyGS network where we run our own satellite ground stations, and that is using MQTT as well, so I configured that as well. But if you are new, you would just have one option, which is add new broker, and then you just click on that. And the basic that you need to configure is the server address. So you can just put 127.0.0.1 if it's the same server where your Node-RED is running. I mean, I just like to actually specify the server address or the IP of the server. So this is why I did like 192.168.1.80, which is my address. And I would also configure it to connect automatically. That's the easiest example. And if you are running a local server, all you have to do is provide your username and the password. So that's the username and the password that you have configured for the MQTT broker in the setup. And of course, if you would connect to a MQTT service which is on the network, you most probably have to configure some sort of security. So you need to enable the TLS, and you have to provide a certificates. You have to create a new TLS config, and there are many different ways how you can do that. But if you are using any of these internet-based services, they would definitely have a documentation how you can set this up, or what are the different parameters that they require, because most probably the port is going to be different. So I'm trying to stick to the easiest scenario, which is your local server, which is on the same IP as your, let's say, main server. The default port is 1883, and then you provide your user and the other password. And then and then you just select that configuration, and then you need to subscribe to a topic. So if you know that much about MQTT, you always have a topic, and the topics are in a hierarchy or structure, and then they are separated by slash. So again, if you are in a home automation scenario, maybe you have you can have something like home slash like ground floor slash bathroom. And then that would give you, you will subscribe to, let's say, a sensor which is called a bathroom sensor, which is probably in your ground floor. But in most cases, people don't tend to create such an elaborate structure. So you just say that, okay, I have a sensor which is called bathroom or something. And then you just type that. And of course, in MQTT, you have the option to say that, let's say, in my bathroom, there are multiple sensors that have a topic of bathroom slash something, or maybe that sensor is going to send you multiple messages on different topics. You can then just say that I want to subscribe to the topic slash and the hashtag character, which says that everything under it I want to subscribe to. I think for testing, I'm just going to create a test topic, and I want to subscribe to that. And then you can specify a QoS and the output type, and I'm going to talk about the output type later. So that's the basic thing. So now I also create a debug node, and so everything that comes out of this mqtt-in, I just put it into the debug node so we can see what's in the messages. And if I deploy this, nothing really going to happen because nobody is sending messages to the test topic yet. So all we can see that we have connected to the MQTT server. So this is a good indication that the server configuration is correct, the user ID and the password and everything, and we can actually connect to it. So if you have done something wrong or there is an issue with your MQTT server, you probably see messages here either disconnected, or you will see a yellow message that is constantly trying to connect. In that case, you need to check your MQTT server. In order for me to test this, well, actually, this is the receiving part. In order for me to test this, we actually have to send a message. So I need an mqtt-out node. So that's where we can send messages into the MQTT network. And I'm going to configure this to the same broker and to the same topic. So ideally, what I send in here, it should come out here because we subscribe to the topic that we sent the messages to. And I can create an inject node. By the way, if you are not using this, you can control and click, and that brings up this quick search, and you don't have to find your nodes from here. This is something that I just use. So what I can do here is, let's say I have a simple node, a simple inject node, which is going to send the current timestamp. And maybe I create another one as well, which is, again, an inject node. And here, I just want to show you a couple of examples. So that's going to send the text, which is hello. And maybe I have a third one as well. So I just did copy and paste. And this is going to send a number 10. And I'm going to link all of these into the MQTT node. Oops. So we can see how it works. So now what I expect to happen is that when I trigger this inject node, the message goes in, and because this is subscribed to the same topic, the same message comes out. So if I send this, you can see that it is the debug 10, so it's coming from this node, and we get the timestamp. If I say hello, then the hello comes out. You can see the hello text here, and if I send 10, the message 10 comes out. So that's how it works, and well, that's what we expect. At this point, I want to show you this MQTT Explorer as well. So you can just Google MQTT Explorer, and this is a Windows application. You can just download it. And this has the same connection screen, so I provide my IP, port, user ID, and the password to my same MQTT server. And if I connect to it, well, I see a lot of messages because there is a lot which is happening on my MQTT server. And this is the hierarchy that I was talking about. Like, you know, for example, I have a device which is called, let's say I have a message here which actually comes in the netio/power cable or 0c/output/1/voltage, and then the data is 235, which is 233 volts. So this is why I like this one, because you can just easily, you know, look at the traffic and what's going on. And now if I send this hello again, then we can see the hello as well. And if you click on this topic, you see it's the test topic. You can also send a new message. So you can see here that I can send, I don't know, this is mine. And if I publish, it comes out here. So we can definitely see that this would subscribe to any message, not just the ones which is coming from Node-RED, but obviously from any sensor. So if I want to just copy and paste this example, just to show you how it would, you know, work on a simple node. So let's say I have a door sensor, for example. And that door sensor is going to send me two different type of information. So there is, let's assume that it's just going to be text. So it is going to send the text open if the door is open, and it's going to send something closed if the door is closed, just to keep it simple. And what I can do is I can subscribe to this topic and do something about that one. So for example, if I have a switch node where I'm going to check whether the message that I've received is open or closed, and depending on that, let's assume that I want to just change the text. So now I replace this open with the text the door is open, and then I replace the other text with another text which is the door is closed. And then I can send this text, for example, to the dashboard, in an email, a notification, or wherever. For just to keep it simple, I'm going to send it to my debug node. So if I deploy this and I just delete all the messages, so we are going to see what's happening. And then I do open. Oh yeah, so the original message comes out here as well. So let me just close this. But you can see that the door is open, is coming through this path here. And if I say closed, then the door is closed. Yeah, very simple. And but that's how you would control an input, or that is how you would process an input that is coming over MQTT. Of course, this one is not going to be in your flow. That would be a function that your sensor is going to implement and send these messages to MQTT. I mean, in most cases, it's not going to be words open, close. It would be like something like zeros and ones, or something very similar. Or if it's temperature, it's just a temperature value. And without going into too much detail, I just want to give you another quick example. So if you're not really collecting data from sensors, but let's say you have just a very simple relay that you can control over MQTT, which is going to turn some lights on and off, you can just have a big timer component. So this is something which you have to install separately. But for example, in this big timer, you can configure that you want this switch to come on at dusk. So that would always depend on when the sun is going down. So that's when the lamp is going to come on, and then it should switch off at 22:30, so half past 10. And then here you specify what is the message that the node should send out when it's switching on. So for example, 1, and then what is the message that it sends when it goes off. And that is just going to send a number 1 and a number 0. And then you can just send it to the MQTT, to the topic of that Wi-Fi switch, for example, and then your Wi-Fi switches just automatically go come on at dusk, and then it's going to turn off at 11:30. The next thing I want to talk about, and I think it is important to pay attention to, is the various data types. And that also varies depending on, you know, what version of Node-RED you have, because the way the the mqtt-in node handles the different data types have changed a lot. So I have an example here where you can see that I have a node which is configured so that it receives messages to the weather station. So it is coming in a topic which is weather station / temperature. And what I have configured here in the output is this was the output or this was the type which was available almost right from the beginning of Node-RED, which says the Node-RED is going to auto-detect what the value is, and it's going to treat it as either a string or a buffer. And what is happening is you can see that I've sent this data into this raw output, and you can see the values here. But if you would notice, well, it says here as well that this value is a string, and it's in double quotes. So it shows like 10.06, but this is 10.06 not as a number but as a string, which is important because once you start working with this type of data, then for example, if you want to compare it, like what I've done here is like, okay, is this number is more than 0? And then depending on that, you want to change or split the direction. If you want to compare a text with a number, it might. I think in this example, it's probably going to work because the first number is in this case is 1, which is always bigger than the 0, but this is something that you really have to pay attention to, that if you want to work with these number values and they are not coming through as numbers, you probably need to convert them, because otherwise Node-RED is not going to give you any errors, because JavaScript is, well, this is how it works. It tries to work with all sorts of data, but it might just not do the thing that you want the system to do. So for example, what you can do is you can add the change node, and then you can say that I want my payload to equal to an expression, and you can do number and then message.payload. And now the number is converted, the payload is converted to a number value. So if I scroll down and wait for the next one, you can see that this is the text value that we get from the raw input, and this is the number value. So now the number doesn't have a double quotes and it's appearing in blue. So now it is being treated as a number. And if you look at the output now it says auto detect its JSON object, string or buffer, and I actually changed that to this value already. And not only that it can detect between string and JSON, but it can also detect between numbers as well. So now you can see that the raw number is also a number type. But again, you have to pay attention to this, because otherwise if you are not checking what is the output data format, then Node-RED might do something that you don't expect to do. And again, if you are importing flows from examples that you find on the net, and if the example is really old example, this top option wasn't available. So your flow is going to default to this option. So the numbers are going to come through as strings. So it's easy to fix, but this is something that you just need to be aware of. And the other thing is that if your data is coming through as JSON, like in this example, then again you have the option to convert it as or parse it as a JSON. So you can either select this, parse as the JSON object, or you can leave it on auto detect as well. Again, in the past, this option wasn't available, and actually there was a separate JSON node which you would have to put in, and that would do the conversion. So the JSON string was coming through as a string, and then you would use this node to convert it to a JSON. So we don't have to do that anymore. But again, I'm telling you this because if you see older examples, even examples of my flows, loads of them I published in the past would have that JSON, because this is how it worked in the past. So now you can see that this comes through as an object. So it's no longer just a JSON string, but it's a proper object. So you can see that it has things like RSSI and uptime and pool and some other things. So what you can do is, for example, you can reference these fields as using the dot notation because it's an object. So if you want to use these values, you can just reference them to message.payload.uptime, and that is going to give you 119, or message.payload.delta, and that is going to give you 30. And here as well, you can see that the various data types. So these are all numbers, and these relays which says 0111 is actually a string. But again, always put everything in the debug, look at the debugger, and then pay attention to the type as well. And it usually says the type of the payload, but then once you start, if it's an object and you start going into it, it's not going to tell you the type, but you can tell that it's a number type if it's blue, and it's a string if it's red, like that. Okay, so finally let's talk about the dynamic option, which again, it's only available fairly recently in the MQTT-in node. So it is just an MQTT-in node, just like all the others that I've shown you. You specify the server, you have the same output option, but here you can, normally you would have this one which says subscribe to a single topic, but now you can do dynamic subscription. And actually, if you click here and if you read the documentation, it's actually going to tell you what is the various options that are allowed. So you have to send in an action which says either connect, disconnect, subscribe, or unsubscribe. So you can connect, disconnect from a server, and you can dynamically subscribe to, unsubscribe to topics. And of course, in the topic, you specify what you want to subscribe to or unsubscribe to. And then you can even specify the broker details, so you can just pass in all the, the IP addresses. I find this probably a little bit less, well, I wouldn't say less useful, but probably it's going to be used less. But I can see that the subscribe and the unsubscribe would be a good feature dynamically if you only want to receive certain data for a limited period of time, and then you can just unsubscribe to it depending on your your scenario, or you can even disconnect. It's maybe if you are having too much traffic and you just want to limit how much resources your flow uses, and you can just unsubscribe, so your server needs to deal with less messages. But let's see how it works. I'm just going to go back to the debug node, and what I have here is I have two inject node. So one is injecting into the test topic, and the other one is to the test2 topic. And I have this debug node here. So what I'm going to do is let's just delete all my log entries. And I think all my debugs are turned off. So at the moment, we are only going to see this. So if I send a message, let me just go like that. So if I send a message to the test node, then nothing happens. If I send a message to the test2 node, nothing happens. Because in this dynamic node is connected to the MQTT server, but is not really subscribed to anything at the moment. So what I can do here is, the first example is like how you can subscribe. So I send the message.action to subscribe and the message to the topic that I want to subscribe to. And if I send this message into the node, then, well, seemingly nothing happens. But if I send in a message, well, we now get a response. So from this point onward, now this is subscribing to the test topic. It is still not responding to the test2 topic, but I can also subscribe to test2, and now I get the messages of test1, and I get the messages of test2 as well. So you can use a single MQTT-in node to subscribe to as many topics as you want. And maybe you can even set these inject nodes up to inject in the beginning when the Node-RED starts, so they would just subscribe to these topics immediately, but you can just use one MQTT-in node to subscribe to multiple topics, so you don't have to deal with multiple nodes. Maybe you can make your flow simpler that way. So that's how we subscribe to those topics, and then we can also unsubscribe. So if I unsubscribe to test1, then you can see that I can do inject on test1, sorry, on test, but nothing happens. But the test2 still works, and I can unsubscribe on test2 as well. And now this doesn't work as well. Doesn't work either. But it still works. We are sending the message into the MQTT network, but this is just not subscribed to that anymore. So we are not going to get the messages. I guess you get the idea. And in here, I just only wanted to show you how you can do the subscription and the unsubscription. So you put unsubscribe here, and you can also do connect and disconnect here as well. Of course, in that case, you don't need the topic. So you just have a separate message where the message.action either says connect or disconnect. And that would connect or disconnect this MQTT node from the MQTT broker. And finally, I want to talk about these toolbox functions that I mentioned in the beginning. I'm just going to fly through these options because, as I said, I have a separate video on that, so you can find a link to that in the video description. So I created a couple of different scenarios, and these are mainly like these function nodes which do some calculation, and you can see the results at the end. And of course, I'm going to test these with these sensor nodes, but you can obviously connect an MQTT sensor to that. So maybe you can have a function which is going to remember the state, so whether the last message was on and off, and also it's going to count how many seconds something was on. So again, yeah, you maybe have a device or something, you want to see how long something is on, you want to monitor it. Now you can do that, and then, you know, if the on status reaches, let's say, 300 milliseconds, you want to do something about it, maybe send an alert, or maybe you can even switch it off. So you can do this with this function node. The other thing I created is also like a more counter and uptime calculator. So again, you switch the you send on a message, and then it's going to remember that it's also going to show you that the thing is on now, and it does the same counting, but then it also can count how many times something has been switched on and off. So now I'm switching this thing on and off, and then it counts that it's been running for 22 seconds, and then now it has been switched on and off for 3 times. So yeah, maybe you have a device or a pump which is sensitive to a lot of on-off cycles, and you want to monitor that. Now you can monitor the runtime and how many times it has been switched on and off. So that's another example. Or the other usual things which I usually do is I want to see on my flow what was the last time I received the data from a particular device. So the mqtt-out node, or sorry, the mqtt-in node goes into these two function nodes, and the top here is just going to show you here what was the last time the message was received, and the one below it's going to do a counting. So you can see that, like, you know, you can see the actual time as well, but if you really, well, if you're more interested in how much time has elapsed since the last update, this is just going to count up, and it's going to say like hours and minutes and days and hours and minutes if it goes that far. And these are all about the toolbox functions that I thought it could be useful for you as well. But again, if you want more information on that, or if you want to access these examples, then just go to the video description and you find the link to this video. I'm really happy that you have managed to get this far in the video, which means that you have really liked the content that I showed. Just to recap what we have learned today. So we have learned how to use the basic MQTT in and out controls within Node-RED. We also seen how we can set up a broker connection, or how we can create multiple connections to multiple brokers. We also see how we can monitor and look at the MQTT traffic outside Node-RED if you need some additional help just to better understand how things are working. We also seen a couple of examples how you can use it in a sensor scenario. And we looked at a couple of basic data types that you would most probably use in MQTT messages. And also we looked at the dynamic scenarios which allow you to control how you want to connect or disconnect from the broker, or whether you want which topics you want to subscribe to or unsubscribe to dynamically. And finally, we looked at a couple of toolbox examples, which I have explained in more details in one of my other videos. But I'm happy that you managed to stay with me for this long. That will be all for today. Thanks for watching, and hopefully see you next video.